Hi, everyone. I'm John Lux. I'm the Executive Director of Film Florida, and welcome to another edition of Film Florida Friday. Film Florida Fridays are interactive conversations about current topics, initiatives, and relationship building in Florida's film, television, commercial, and digital media production industry. Today, we're talking about DPs and DITs, both of which are integral to the success of SET, and I'm excited to have our group here to talk with us about their roles. If you've been with us before, you know the routine. In a moment, our guests will introduce themselves. I'll ask some questions to get things going. During that time, we're going to ask everybody keep your microphones on mute to avoid background noise. After we've gotten through initial questions, we'll open up to the audience for questions and conversation. At that time, please make sure you use the hand raising function so we can call on you. We want this to be conversational and interactive, but we also obviously don't want everybody talking at the same time. We're going to ask everybody to keep their questions and comments brief in the interest of time and out of fairness to others that want an opportunity. And as I mentioned last month, if you're going to use the chat box, please keep the conversation pertinent to the discussion. We've had a few conversations get off the rails a little bit in the previous months, so we want to make sure we're not a distraction to those that are paying attention. Film Florida Fridays are free, as everybody knows, but we hope you'll consider donating $20.23 for our 2023 fundraising campaign. That donation link will be posted in the chat box throughout the discussion, and you can always find that on our website as well. And with that, I want to introduce our guests. We have DITs, Kyle and Rich, and then we have our DPs, Angel and Pete. So let's get started. Let's start with you, Pete. First, give people a little bit of context. Define what a DP is, first of all, and then tell us your background and how you became a DP.
Okay. Well, DP, first and foremost, is the visual storyteller of the project. Translating the script and the director's vision to light and camera movement. And sometimes that role is more about the light, sometimes it's more about the camera, depends on the project. And my background, I worked as a DP for a long time, but now I'm very much a niche DP specialist in the underwater and water-related field, mostly for movies, but I still have a handful of documentaries and commercial projects every year. I got into it because I got interested in underwater photography at a very young age, and then found ways to tell stories about and around the water. And that's sort of the broad strokes anyway.
Was muted, see, follow my own rules. Angel, over to you. What's your background? How did you get involved in being a DP?
I've been based in Miami since 2000, about 22 years here. I grew up in Venezuela. I started there filming skateboarding videos and doing stage lighting for rock and roll bands and stuff like that. I think that's how I met the cameras and the lights, and as a tool to create something cool. I studied audiovisual journalism, and I did many documentaries. I directed short films and many local commercials and music videos. Then I moved to United States, and I realized that I have a lot to learn. Not only the language, the vocabulary, and also the tools that we didn't have back in Venezuela at that time. So I started working as a PA, as an editor. I went into the grip and lighting department. I learned from many great gaffers and key grips in town. And around 2005, I established myself as a director of photography. Built my demo reel was built with promotions from MTV Latin America, a little bit of HBO, many cool networks that were here at that time. And nothing, I found my way onto, narrative, which is what I really like. And of course, based in Miami, we do a lot of music videos, commercials, a little bit of everything. If you want to stay here, you have to be open to, be versatile.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. No one trick ponies probably anymore. All right, let's move over to the DIT side. Rich, first define what the role is, and then give us your background.
Sure. Well, I mean, DIT actually stands for Digital Imaging Technician, if people don't know that. But it's kind of like a blanket cast. It kind of breaks down into three main jobs. First, you have the offloading, making sure that the media is secure coming out of the camera, media management, basically. Then a traditional DIT will take that footage, develop a look with the DP or the director, sync the sound, and then create all the dailies that get sent on for the editorial process. And then more recently, there's been a section of DITs that are doing live grading, which is basically creating CDLs as the shot is going on, linking them to time code. So you can be adjusting the frame and the color balance as the camera is in motion moving along, which is particularly good for episodic. So if you have multi-camera setups, you can track this and make sure your shots are all matched before they even get passed on to the post process. As for myself, I'm a DIT, an editor, and a colorist. I've been doing this for a little over 30 years now. So you see a lot of changes happening, and it's just that you can never stop learning. You have to keep on going constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Kyle, last to you, give us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, nice to meet everybody. Apologize, I'm in a public area, so a little bit of background noise. But I'm, I'd be considered a DIT on the call sheet, but as Rich pointed out, there's a couple facets to what we do with tasks, and I would put myself more in the more basic end, not to sell myself short, but I'm more of what's considered a media manager because my main roles are downloading, transcoding, sometimes renaming files when clients have that. And I'm also starting to work at DAM and training, which is data asset management, which is more on the post-production side of getting things organized and readily available for our clients.
Cool. Now I want to stick with Kyle and Rich. Rich, we'll start with you on this one, but 20, 25 years ago, this role didn't even exist because there was no digital files. Everything was either film or tape. So talk about like the very beginning. You said you've been in this role for a pretty long time. So you were probably there at the very beginning. What motivated you to go in this specific direction for your career?
Actually, it was a requirement almost. Back in 2007, I was working at this production company in St. Pete, Florida called CMR Studios. And they had the foresight to invest in one of the first Red 1 cameras here in Florida. It's actually the second camera here in Florida. And love the red, hate the red. Everybody's got their opinions about it. But that camera changed how we do things. It was the first camera that was shooting to cards or to hard drives. It was the first 4K camera. It was the first camera capturing anything in RAW. So all the rules were different at that point. I mean, we had to develop these workflows because if you made one mistake, your day's worth of footage just disappeared. You don't have a tape to digitize back again into the system. It's just gone. So we had to develop these workflows and make sure we had backups and systems, and the footage that, the editing systems at the time couldn't even handle or see. Nobody could handle 4K. Nobody could handle R3D media. So we had to develop all of that. And that's basically what we did for all our clients, so that we could able to deliver these high quality images that we knew this camera could capture and be able to do. A bit of a nightmare sometimes, but as I said, it changed the industry.
Yeah. And Kyle, how about you? What do you remember about some of those early times?
So I've only been in the industry for about 4.5 years. So I'm coming from more of the aspect where now we're starting to try to transition more into uploading into servers like Iconic, Venmo, which is a lot different than where Rich has been all these years ago. I mean, Rich is actually my mentor. I started out because of him. I was a PA, and he was just always willing to like, hey, you want to learn something? And I never knew what a DIT was until I got into this industry, and it's one of those specialized things that are so needed. So it's cool that I get to share this panel with him today as someone who started with him and has grown since then in my own career. You know, and a lot of stuff going on now is the fact that, yeah, digital was a huge transition 15 years ago, and we're obviously not going to roll away from that. But now the biggest thing is trying to get export times a lot faster, which is good on paper, but we're not there yet in terms of our infrastructure. There's beautiful training with things like Frame.io. There's a huge training system of what they want to do, what they want to accomplish when someday like Starlink comes up. A lot of that is great until the fact, you know, we have to get better internet, especially in the continental United States. We have to get good internet access. I've been places where we're in the islands and it's just like, we need drives and we need good drives. There's no way I can upload everything after the end of the day. So I'm in this new kind of post section where we want the turnaround time as good as possible, but it's important that productions know don't skip out on drives, because that is the meat and potatoes of what makes sure that everything we filmed, like Rich said, when that card's gone, you have no more footage unless you backed it up. And if you don't have it, that's a whole day's wasted. So that's a big stress that comes on it. But as long as people understand, we're still not out of the old ways until things become more synchronistic. We got to keep doing as best as we can. USB-C over USB-A sort of ports, and get good computers, get good hard drives, have backups upon backups. And that's what I'm really kind of working with as far as clientele in my career path.
And now, Rich, I want to jump back to you on something. I mean, it seems like if you're not ultra organized in this role, you're a dumpster fire. And as we know, there are plenty of people in our industry that you know, aren't real organized. So talk about the importance of being kind of that organized person that is able to make, because you literally have a pile of files here, and if you aren't organized, it's just a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, organization is the key. And having a strong workflow, knowing that how, you know, from the camera into your ingest into the system, into the processes of your transcoding or developing or syncing sound, all the way out to your backups. I mean, when I train DITs, and Kyle will attest to this, I literally not only have it, you know, as a workflow, but I have a physical thing. Cards come in on the one side of my cart. As I go through the process, they move across my cart. So by the time they're done and ready to go back to the camera, they are in on the other side of my cart. It's a physical motion going through the system. So this way I could be, if I get called away from my cart for a length of time, I can come back and I can see where the card is on my cart, knowing what part of the transition or what part of the offload process it is part of. Because once you go, the card goes back into the camera and gets formatted, you lost your opportunity. So
Right.
yes, there are programs out there like Post Haste, which allow you to make it's a free program you can download. It allows you to build a folder structure instantaneously. So I have several structures. If I have a one camera shoot or a multi-camera shoot, if I'm just offloading, if I'm transcoding, if I'm having to make multiple things, I have preset folder structures that I automatically can pull up in a second and have the hard drive set up that way. So all the drives are set the same. And then obviously we use, footage. We use a software like Shotput Pro or Hedge to make sure that our copies are perfect copies. And they also double check to make sure that everything is running, that everything's safe as a copy. So we're confident when we hand that card back that it can be formatted.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, Peter, we talked about how important organization is for a DIT. What makes a really good DP?
Well, first, I just want to touch, I'm really glad that Rich brought in the genesis of digital, because most of my career, actually in years, was spent shooting film. And I remember those early days when the Red first came out very well. And we were very dependent on people like Rich for organization, but also for technical expertise, because we went from being experts at shooting film and crafting the image through filters. And then all of a sudden we had this new collaboration with people who are exceptionally digitally savvy. And I just wanted to note also, my memory of those early days was that even though we don't talk about it much anymore, 3D filming was also sort of this weird sort of gasoline that got put on the fire, because there was this fascination with producers to shoot 3D, and film cameras just were not the right way to do it. So right when the image quality was getting so great, 4K, RAW, now all of a sudden we had cameras that could be in sync together, and it happened at the same time, which I think kind of propelled it really rapidly forward. But to get back to, I just wanted to say that because I was really when Rich started talking about that, it sort of brought me back to those really awkward times for all of us, because we were used to shooting a film, seeing the film the next day in dailies. Now, you know, what Rich mentioned about like going from coloring on set to actually doing a little bit of editing on set has and is really rapidly transforming the whole filmmaking process. Now, if we're on a motion picture and we have 3 days to work on a sequence, by the end of the second day, most motion pictures now are bringing in like a rough cut, and we're looking at it together, and we're crossing shots off the boards because we've decided we don't need them anymore, and maybe we've added a couple. So there's this sort of, the filmmaking process has been brought more onto the set than it ever was back in the film days. Oh, I'm sorry, John, what was your original question? Sorry, you're muted.
You're muted, yeah.
Sorry about that.
Go
So
ahead.
is bringing more of that on set, is that good or bad?
Oh, I mean, I think for that's hard to say. I mean, I would say that it's good because we're all, in some ways, it's made the filmmaking process even more collaborative, which I like. A DP, a DIT, an editor. There's all these people that used to be in their own little boxes, and now they're coming together, and with the right director who actually is good at receiving input while still having their auteur status, you know, they're the one in charge. Some directors are really good at hearing without it distracting them from their vision. So I feel like we're all more involved with the actual final process than we once were. So
Yeah.
I see that as a positive, because it's
and now,
obviously filmmaking is an inherently collaborative medium.
right. And then the original question was, what do you think makes a good DP? What makes you good at your job?
I think the most important characteristic for a good DP is to be thoroughly committed to listening well to the director's vision and helping that person get there. So, and that's a very vague. Now I'll go into examples. Like you know, DPs don't really want to have necessarily a look. You want to have a default way of shooting. You know, your ratios of fill and backlight and all the things that might define you as a default when there's a gap in leadership. So, but most of the time, I'm really just trying to hear really well what the director is saying, how they want it to feel, and then I think it's very important to have like a really good command of both verbal language and visual language to communicate to the director, is this what you're looking for? Sometimes, for example, now, especially in the digital age, I always carry a few like small still cameras with me. I'll go in, I'll do some lighting, I'll show them, I'll get a double or a stunt player into the set, and I'll do some moves with, you know, either the real camera or another camera. And now with digital, we can really like go back right away and say, is this what you're going for? Is this making you feel the way you want to feel? And so the role of the DP really is to meet or exceed those expectations, that director is getting, you know, something. I mean, in a perfect world, you show them something with the light and the movement of the camera that is even better than what they had planned, but more like what they had imagined.
Now, Angel, I saw you nodding your head a few times there. What, in your mind, what makes a good DP?
Yeah, well, everything that Pete's saying is completely true. I think also the way of communicating, not only the artistic part, right, and the creative part, which is that's why we're there. We've been chosen to do our job, but also communicating and understanding what the another department has to do, and you know the things, everything that takes to create something or to do their job. Communication is key, I believe, and also be able to help production, you know, to work on strategies and stuff like that, to be able to finish on time and on budget. No, that's also something that it's another side of us. We can be very creative. We can be, you know, have the film in our mind, but we have to finish the film and we have to do it. So that's another part that it's also, I think it's important. It's the dual side. No.
Yep, the balance. Now, I want to stick with you, Angel. I mean, we talked about how the DITs have really only been a thing for, you know, a decade, 2 decades, but DPs have been around forever. But the technology is what has really changed for a DP over the last, you know, 15, 20 years. How has that change in technology made it easier or harder for you to do your job?
Well, when I started, you know, even though that I started doing film, the budgets or the projects that I have access were Super 16 at that moment, and my big budgets were 35 millimeters, right? But video was always there for me. You know, I started late 90s and early 2000. So the transition for me was easier than for another directors of photography. I think I enjoy the ride. I enjoy the things, the videos getting better. I also felt the amount of, you know, when the clients started seeing more details, there were more opinions on set, you know, and that was, at the beginning, was a little bit complicated because, you know, many people talking and taking decisions, you know, and so the speed changed a little bit of, you know, of our process. But cameras are getting great, you know, more latitude, more sensibility, you know, that's amazing. I think one of the changes that also happens is with lighting too. You know, when I bought my first camera, somebody told me, don't buy cameras, you know, they're gonna change every day. You know, buy lights, they will never change, no? And right after that, LEDs came to play, and, you know, now it's amazing. It's amazing, you know, what these lights can do. And, you know, now you don't need big 18Ks on a condor just to light a street. You know, you can do it with your sky panels and plug it right into the wall. So I think it's making our life, it's giving us more opportunities as well. And at the same time, you know, the accessibility, be able to shoot and film and video, I'm sorry, and be able to see what you're doing is giving the opportunity to new DPs, you know, to become DPs earlier or faster, you know. I don't know if that's good or bad, but at the same time, you know, there's more ideas, there's more competition, there's more ways to do things. You know, before, just with film is, you know, you needed to be a really good DP to get a good project, you know, and now we see that starting early, no? So I don't know, it's good and bad, but I'm enjoying the ride.
Options sometimes are good and bad, that's for sure. Pete, I want to jump back to you. You talked a little bit about your under camera work. What drew you? I mean, you have some awesome credits, so just tell us a little bit about some of the credits you've worked on from an underwater standpoint, and what drew you to want to do underwater DP work?
Well, I grew up here in South Florida, and as we all know, it's quite hot here, especially in the summers. So I spent my whole life in the water as a child, and you know, at a certain point, my friends and I were going out, you know, fishing and diving, and I wanted to just like do more than just throw animals into the boat. So I got into underwater photography. That's what drew me. And then when I eventually did go to a school where I made films as part of an art program. And then I just always was drawn back to my aquatic roots in terms of the themes of the films I wanted to make. Recently, my credits were Avatar: Way of Water, where I spent about 4 years working with Jim Cameron in tanks and in the ocean, doing testing and shooting. It is very unconventional work method, because of the first 2 years of the project, we were filming virtual people, really, because it's all performance capture. So they have reference markers all over their bodies, but we wanted to get like 8K resolution images of their faces for every scene. So I had a team of 3 underwater camera people, so that while we were doing the performance capture, we're always capturing the face, so that when the animators got back into the characters, they could look for nuances in the facial expressions from 3 different angles. So anytime, and any performance in that movie that you would see was done like for real in some way. Like we crafted large mechanical creatures that we could drag people around in the ocean to see how they would move through water, so the physics would be correct. So it was not really a normal filmmaking, because it's really to support animation. Then we did have another half in New Zealand where we shot real actors in water to then mate with the performance capture characters, which is even very detailed process to try and get someone to swim through a mechanical reef to match with a character we shot a year and a half before. So those were very difficult, challenging processes. But I also worked recently on the Black Panther Wakanda Forever, has an underwater component to it. Also a lot of visual effects, but we did have a lot more time with real actors in water and light, so that was nice. But the trajectory of my credits in my career, I started off about 10 years doing natural history shows as a director, directing wildlife shows and underwater shows, while also working as a camera person in the motion picture industry and IMAX. So I kind of, like, when I first got out of school, was going after like anything that could get me back to the water. So I worked on news programs, I worked on IMAX films, I worked as a technician in motion picture until I got accomplished as a camera operator. So I sort of hit it all at once. So my career was more oriented around the water than any one discipline, but always, you know, working with cameras and light. And I've had, because as a specialist, I get to work on a lot of different projects during a year. Sometimes I'll take on, like I just described, like a larger motion picture that's water oriented, but during a year I might just do an underwater scene for a DP or director friend that might be just 2 days or 3 days traveling somewhere, doing their water work and coming back, which has afforded me like a really great opportunity to work with many different people. And I feel like that has helped me learn a lot about what we were talking about before, about working with different departments. When Angel was talking about, like, a DP's role being not just the creative part, but it's also the leadership and collaborative part, like getting to know how to work with visual effects teams, art departments, grip and lighting crew. As my career, I've been doing this for a long time now. In the last few years, that's the part I sort of feel like I embrace the most, is not so much the outcome, because, you know, I'm working with very experienced teams, so I know we're going to have a good outcome, but it's about how to just continue to improve not just the efficiency and quality of the relationships, but also to learn how to make everyone happier while we're working, because it's a very grueling process, a lot of long hours. People asked to do things to separate from their families and friends, to stop doing whatever you're doing with your life. When you're working on a film, you know, you're 10 to 18 hours a day. So you don't have a life on those days. And so I really started to get involved with just really, what does it take to make a film set a happier place?
That's actually a great point. Well, and then, I don't know whether this is going to lead into happy stories or bad stories, but I want to.
Well, I wouldn't be saying that if there weren't the full range, right?
Exactly. So, Kyle, I want to start with you with a little bit of storytelling, and we're going to go around to everybody here. Give us an example. Could be the good, the bad, the ugly. From a set that in terms of your role. Just give us a story that kind of sticks out to you from a recent project, or not so recent project.
Yeah, so I guess a recent one, I've been doing some work with a production company that does a lot of traveling. They do various shows involving music, involving adventure, which is awesome because I love to travel. It's great to be living in Florida. I grew up in upstate New York, but at the same time, you want to change of pace. So we were in the Virgin Islands, and we were filming, doing all this kind of stuff. And unfortunately, after about a day or two, some of my gear wasn't working. Some of my cooling pads were starting not to work. And I ended up getting stuck about 18 hours a day in my hotel instead of being out with my crew, being able to help kind of do some AC work. And they understood, but it was just dumping cards day in and day out, minute after minute, transcoding, because we were doing 6K red. We were doing 10 GoPros, which I was helping hook up with the Hero Jeep for our host and his co-host. And again, we had a beautiful experience. I just wish I had more opportunity to go out and be on location with everyone and be an extra hand. So then learning from that, it was, okay, we're going to buy better cooling gear. We're going to check that my computer is good. Went to the Mac store and got a good diagnostic on that. Got small things like a car adapter that plugs into USB-C. That way I can charge on the go, because we're doing stuff in the next 6 months. We're going to places like Puerto Rico, where sometimes you don't have good AC DC power in the walls, that they lose power all the time. So we're looking at getting Jockey boxes and anchor boxes that are little generators that are silent. It's all about making sure, you know, you troubleshoot, you learn from your next mistake, and you just kind of keep plugging along. The biggest thing is gear, and it can act real faulty. Sometimes, like, my Mac is beautiful right now, and then sometimes it wants to do weird things, like just flutter the brightness on me for no reason, because it's acting up as I'm pushing it at 110%. But, you know, overall, the experiences that may be difficult, it really shows you how to cut your teeth, because at the end of the day, when you're in the Virgin Islands, you can't really call somebody to come out and help you. So you got to figure out what you got to do right then and there. And it's about keeping a cool head and staying organized. Like Rich said, those, I think Rich would agree, those are two big key components that he taught me. Like, you need to keep it together. You need to not freak out the client. You need to work through it, because there's always an answer to something.
Yeah, good. Angel, give us a good story.
That's a complicated one. I mean, for the recent funny things to me that happened is like I was doing a film in Guatemala with Israel team, all the head of departments, and but me and the actors and director cast, they all speak Hebrew. They did all the blockings, all the rehearsals in Hebrew. I was also operating, so I didn't know if they were asking for bring makeup or bring water, or they were actually going through the lines of, you know, of the script. So I was very confused, you know. I didn't know when to pan, when to, you know, change the focus somewhere, because I was completely lost. They were really cool people. So, and I'm mentioning this because we also are, as a directors of photography, we have to travel and we adapt to their cultures. You know, I did a German movie, so you're always learning, no, from another cultures and other countries. But what it was funny on this one is like I was so lost. It looks like they were, and the way that they speak, you know, it feels like they were fighting all the time, and that they wanted to kill each other all the time, and also every time that we take the bus to get back to the hotel, they were screaming at each other. And my gaffer was a local gaffer from here. He was like, you know, very scared about what was going on. But every Friday, you know, when Shabbat comes, you know, everybody was happy, dancing, hugging, eating, you know, together. And we felt so in love, you know. So it was like a roller coaster of emotions. And I'm just saying this because that's one of the beauty of our job, no, is just to live and meet people from anywhere, you know, and it's cool to see and to learn from how they do films in other countries. And
That's great. I love that story. That's awesome. Rich, how about you? You got a good story?
Yeah. First of all, just to touch on what something Kyle said, it's like I tell people when I'm on set, if it looks like I'm doing absolutely nothing, then everything's fine. If I look panicked, then if I looked a little worried, then there's usually trouble. So if I'm just sitting there and like he's not doing anything, everything's running smoothly, just the way it's supposed to. So, but several years ago, as you know, everybody from around the country loves to come shoot in Florida, particularly in the wintertime, because it's snowing there and it's still beautiful here. So we had this agency out of San Francisco in town. We were shooting a couple days, and then we were hopped. And I was offloaded their footage, and we have an expression as DITs: if there's not 3 copies of it, it doesn't exist. So they were backing up 2 copies, and I had space on my drive, so I just made a 3rd copy because it didn't no difference to me. So they shipped one of the drives back to San Francisco, FedEx, UPS, something like that. And then the director took the other drive, and he was looking at the footage while he was flying back to San Francisco. Well, apparently he unplugged the drive without disconnecting it properly. And when they got back to his agency, they plugged the drive in and it was fried. No footage on the drive. They said, all right, well, we've got the drive from UPS, except that drive got lost. They never arrived. They don't know what happened to it. So I get a panicked call saying if I could call the rental house to see if they had any copy, if they had reformatted the cards yet or something like that. And I'm like, I've got all your footage here. I made a 3rd copy just to be safe. And they're like, how much is that you're in charge to send that to us? You know, basically that's their entire shoot, you know, whatever the budget was, right, sitting right there. And I said, you know, whatever the time to copy and you pay the UPS, the shipping charge, and that was it. There's no reason to rake them over the coals because it's just you know, just a simple copy, no time for me really. And you get a good client that way. So by just following those basic standards that we set for safety, having that 3rd copy saved their entire shoot. Because mistakes happen, things get lost, things break. You have to have backup plans to your backup plans, because otherwise stuff happens. And you know, you got to make sure you take care, as in that role, you know, everything that they do on set goes through your hands. You are the bridge between production and post-production. You know, everything is, you know, right there in front of you. So you have to make sure it's safe. And that's the ultimate role of the job. It makes sure that everything is safe.
Yep, good. Peter, you got a good story for us?
Well, when you started the question, you were saying happy or sad. So there's always, you know, the full range, right? There's so many, of course, like Angel said, but one that comes to mind, I was at home one day and someone called me from Iquitos in Peru, and they were like, our director wants to shoot a scene of our actor swimming across the real part of the Amazon where Che Guevara swam across, and no one here will go in the water. They say it's haunted. None of the locals will support it. And they say it's impossible. And these are some ideas. And they told me about ideas of putting like a net across because there was giant trees drifting down with animals on them. And there was, you know, caimans and piranhas and all these things. And the candiru, this fish that would swim up your urethra, all these things they were worried about. So that was at a time in my life when I was still doing a lot of wildlife work. So I had a friend of mine who was actually a bush doctor in the Amazon region who I called about some of their concerns. I had a friend I had just done an alligator and a crocodile film with, and we talked about those concerns. And we sort of, you know, said, you know, I could go look for dragouts for the reptiles, and working at night in the Amazon won't be a problem with piranhas. And the candiru, you can just, you know, wear a tight bathing suit. So I went down there armed with a lot of research, and Gael Garcia Bernal swimming across the Amazon for Diarios de Motocicleta. We went out in the real river at night, and we did these scenes with him swimming in inky blackness. And living out there with a group of people from all over the world was sort of like a peak location experience of like different cultures combining, and me being able to bring in my niche expertise, because I had spent a lot of time in those kind of environments. Was a really nice feeling to, like, you know, find what I could bring to the table of something they were already doing that was really great before I got there.
That's amazing. I mean, there's a quick question in the chat that's related to that, Pete, for you. So it says Florida has a lot of underwater a lot of water, and clients say, let's shoot an underwater scene, although conditions may not be ideal. What do you look for when you choose an ideal underwater location versus saying, no, this needs to be in a tank?
But a great question. So obviously I'm fielding that type of question on a regular basis. When you talk about water, there's all kinds of water, right? We have the ocean, we have freshwater environments. Fortunately, Florida has like a world-class natural feature in our springs. So if someone wants to shoot in a freshwater environment and we want to have control over water clarity so we can control the light better, there's many different springs or spring-fed rivers or spring-fed ponds that we can pull from to have clear water. Or if we want to have tannic water, some of the rivers have, decaying leaves and tannic water. So the freshwater part we have covered really well, if people are willing to travel to North Central Florida. Now, the ocean part's a little more complicated because we know Florida's famous for coral reefs and good water, but we're very susceptible to winds stirring up the water because we have a lot of silt. So just a little bit of wind can make the water pretty bad. So weather windows, of course, so in the ocean, you have all kinds of, you have the wet water conditions, you have wildlife events like jellyfish, you have swell that could come up, you have currents, tides. So really it's about like, what's the scale of the project? How much time do they have to wait around for good conditions and watch weather and the flexibility? Or do we need to, go to a tank for some things until we get the right, like if we're going to do close-ups, maybe we fake the ocean in the tank until we get the right wide angle opportunity out in the ocean. So it's a dynamic thing. There isn't like a quick answer to that question, but you have to know a lot about what causes the water to do certain things to answer those questions for a given production.
Well, and somebody, I'm glad we saw this because I had actually forgotten, but when we announced this, Film Florida Friday topic, somebody emailed me and said, do we even have tanks in Florida anymore? And so, it changes all the time. So what is the water tank situation here in the state?
We don't really have a tank proper, but there's a handful of universities that have dive wells. For example, FIU North has a diving tank that almost never gets used. It's like 15 feet deep and they keep the water pretty good. And I've gone in there and sort of fashioned that into a studio by blacking it out or putting in, a custom made vinyl background. So that's really where we are in Florida right now. We're approaching universities that have large pools and turning them into tanks.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
There was as a few people on the call probably know, there was an attempt to try and build a studio with tanks that sort of, I think really was very reliant on if we could get some type of incentive back in Florida, which is sort of the elephant in the room. Anytime Floridians get together, we end up having to talk about that because I can't tell you how many times during any given year I'm shooting a story that would be much better suited to shoot in Florida for a variety of reasons. And we're going to Georgia because they have a better tax rebate and it's not the right place to shoot it. And it's something that, hopefully we can improve over time, but we probably would have a tank immediately if we had a tax rebate. Yeah. Because there'd be people willing to invest in it.
Yeah. Well, as we all know, that's a whole nother Film Florida Friday topic that probably could be a month long.
Yeah, of course.
We really wanted to go that direction. Rich, I want to jump back to you and talk a little bit. You and I, for those that don't know, Rich was a podcast guest for the Film Florida podcast a couple of seasons ago. So I've known Rich's story for a little while, and I, of course I'm biased, but I think you should go back and listen to every episode of the podcast, but specifically Rich's if you're interested in this topic, because we really kind of get in the weeds on a lot of these topics. But one of the things we talked about, Rich, was your company, Silverbox Studios, where you do more than just DIT work. So talk about your mindset going into a project if you're just working as the DIT versus if you are going to have a larger role on that project. Does that change how you look at come to a project?
Not really. as I say, I'm a DIT, I'm an editor and a colorist. And taking those facets of what's needed for post-production in just the editing side and in the final color grading of the images, bringing that language with me on set. I'm basically, as we said, as I said before, as being a bridge. I have to know the language of the DP. I have to be able to talk in exposures and contrast ratios and things like that they understand. And then I also need to be able to talk in codecs and formats and things that editors understand. So being able to work on set and in post just strengthens my ability to help in both locations. So that way it's if I have to go up to a DP and talk about a shot, we can talk about, they might want to try to shoot a scene that's super dark. And I'm like, no, we need to expose properly. We can make it darker in post, and they just have to, we have to have a relationship so they'll trust me when I say that, doing this will be underexposing or overexposing or introducing noise on a technical side. And then, like I said, once we have a relationship that we know that we can trust each other, it usually is better. It ends up being better for the project overall down the line.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay, we have like one or two more questions on the script here that we're going to ask. So if people do want to ask questions, use the hand raising function that's at the bottom of your screen, and we'll call on you in 1 second. But I want to just go around the grid here real quick. Angel, let's start with you. Advice you would give somebody if they wanted to follow your path as a DP.
Well, first, I think as a DP, prepare yourself, of course, be humble. And you have to be open, and aware, because you have to, first of all, you have to live, you have to experience, you have to travel, you have to read, you have to listen to music, you have to go to church to see how the light goes through the big windows, but you also have to go to the strip club and see how the red neon, plays in that location, so that's very important. You have to live, you have to be aware, and you have to be open to the people surround you, because you never know when your next job where it's coming from. It might be a big director, or it might be from the craft service person, or the PA that is helping you to move stuff around. So I think that's very important. And experiment. Now the technologies let you experiment. Everybody has a good, decent camera on their cell phones. So it's more about do, and learn from your mistakes, and surround yourself from people that has the same energy that you, and that are looking for the same path. That sometimes the collaboration process start very early, with your friend from school or your neighbor or something. You do something together and you both grow together, and then you're doing big movies and big projects. So it's all about energy, I believe, and understanding, what are we trying to do, and that we're gonna represent the life, and we're gonna represent things. So we have to just be able to see, right?
Yeah, good. I like that. Kyle, what about you? Advice?
Yeah, so I got fortunate. I think my second day as a PA ever, I got some really good advice from other PAs. They were like, I've been doing this 4 or 5 years. In my head, I'm like, so how do you move up? And they go, stop taking PA work. You want to do something else, find yourself a mentor in a department and try to work through that. So I really took that to heart and just still tried to learn as I was supposed to, learn the ins and outs. You grip, you do art, you try to help in camera, you try to help in the office. Again, I was very fortunate. Rich was on set, always willing to offer some advice. And he's like, what do you think about this? I go, you tell me about it. I don't know anything about this. What's the deal with DIT work? And it happened to be something that was really important that I never knew, but it was something specialized, which was another piece of advice I got from an art director. He's like, don't do art. You're going to be 18 hours a day. I never see my family. We're just breaking ourselves down. find something specialized, aquatics, audio, DIT, any new thing that comes in is super important because as Rich knows, who's been in the industry the longest, everything changes. We went from tape to digital. Now they're trying to get things going in the cloud, which is more of what I'm experiencing. Wherever you are now, understand you're going to be there for a bit. And I'm still trying to struggle and freelance, getting people to give me an opportunity because productions are skittish and they want to keep who they want to keep, who work out. Because if you mess up, it's tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars in mistakes. And I really respect that as a business standpoint. But you just do your time, keep trying to put your name out there, call people every once in a while. Don't be a nuisance and call them every single day, every single week. But once a month is like, hey, I'm around if you need some, even to a capacity of a PA. I still do that sometimes. Just say, all right, and the next time I also offer these services and I would like to do that for you. Build a list of people who want you, who know you can DIT or DP or whatever you want to do in your facets. It's always about presenting yourself and building relationships and networking. Especially as a freelancer, that's such a huge aspect because you're always going to work with different people. But to anybody who thinks about jumping into this, there's no better time than to try it whenever, but be patient and work on a second hustle because that's where I'm still at. But thankfully, things are starting to really get in my aspect where, again, that DAM work I'm doing, that data asset management, is going to also provide some more steady work, paying bills, peace of mind, and then keep me in the industry and keep me motivated and productive. And then I also get to do DIT stuff and traveling, which is a huge win for me.
Good, good. Peter, how about you? Advice?
Well, pulling from what Angel said when he mentioned, go out and do, live, develop a way of seeing, and then don't let technology stand in your way, start shooting your own things right away. But I also like the idea of sort of balancing, like do your own thing, learn, have your own vision, but then also a mentor process, like what Kyle was talking about, is very, is a really important thing, because you have someone who's seasoned in the industry or industries that you're trying to get into, and you can't replace that. And so, treat your mentor well and they'll treat you well. And then when you're not working with your mentor, just keep pushing your own look, your own vision.
Good, good. Rich, advice?
Well, as Kyle kind of touched on, what I try to teach people that I'm training is, the only thing that isn't going to change in the industry is the fact that everything is going to change in this industry. It's, there's nothing I use today in my workforce as a DIT, as an editor, as a colorist that existed when I first got into this business. It's all new. We've all had to learn these new things. I always felt bad for the DPs who knew film stocks, could look at things, I need this film stock or that film stock, knew them by the numbers, knew exactly what they were going to get. Boom, 6 months later, it's all this digital and all of that knowledge is out the window and they have to relearn different camera sensors and different exposures. It's always going to be a learning curve. There's always technology is going to change. Kyle's talking about the cloud. The last film I did, we were uploading our dailies to the cloud where the editors were editing them the same day. We were shooting in North Carolina, they were editing in New Orleans, and the producers were watching everything in LA. And we were getting the notes back the following day of what had to be reshot or had to be changed, or if we could move on from different scenes or release different actors. It was all that, as we were saying, literally almost editing on set. It's nothing like it was years ago, and tomorrow's going to be nothing like it is today. So always be used to the change is going to come. Keep your eyes open and keep learning.
Very true. Very true. All right, Jude, go ahead, Angel. Yep, go ahead.
One thing I think is important for people that's starting in the business is like, especially if you're in Florida, here the things goes by seasons. Sometimes it's raining season. So, so it's a lot of up and downs in terms of work. So, you need to have nerve made of steel. I don't know, sometimes because you can be working nonstop and then you have a month that you haven't done anything too. So that's always a tough one for people that doesn't have enough clients or doesn't have resources to work, and it's cool to accommodate, to understand that that's normal. And, sometimes you need to have another job or something like that, or a part-time job, or if you don't have anything, at least use that time to prepare yourself. So then when you have that chance, you do the best that you can.
Yeah.
And I'd like to just top on the end of that is, but I also tell people is that the success of your career is often equal to the success of your ability to network. It's having those communications. Even like as a DIT, I might not have anything to do with the grip department, but I know all the grips in the area. We all know each other. We all, it's like I said, it's almost, you've been on so long, you're almost like a small family. Get to know the people around you, and you'll be surprised how often, you're brought back into the fold of doing jobs just by having friends. You might not need to see them for 2 years, and all of a sudden they'll call you and say, hey, I need you on this project. Can you come help me?
Yeah, that is great. Okay, Jude, I'm going to highlight you so you can come on down and go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, I was unmuting. Thank you. And once again, thank you everyone for being here. These are the best meetings that I ever go to in this industry. Gentlemen, I'm a indie film screenwriter and director, and I just bought a red Komodo. And Rich, my primary question was for you. When I bought it at B&H, they told me, okay, the data cards are $500 a piece. So I heard, and I also heard Kyle saying, I think you said don't skimp on the data cards. I think that's what I heard you say. So here I am, I've got one data card. I bought two, what do you call it, viewfinders, and one of them has a recording capability for 1080p. So I think I'm good with that, but I just wanted to say, here I am, I'm a broke indie director, but how many of these suckers do I need to buy off the top? I figured that was just a real quick question for you. And hopefully I'll be able to reach you in future to ask other questions professionally, because every single one of you gentlemen has hit on things that I've got in current projects or will be working on, and I'd love to refer you to people, or if most importantly, perhaps work with you in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Jude. Rich, you want that one?
Sure. And yes, you can always, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. That's not a problem at all. My answer would be 2 cards. One in the camera and one that you're offloading this footage that you just shot. This way you're not holding up your project as you're going along. This way you can have one that you're recording the scene, and then when that card is full, pull the card, you hand it off to your DIT who is downloading and making sure that's, while that process is happening, you have your second card in the camera and you're continuing to roll your footage. So you're not wasting any of your daylight or your time or your schedule.
I forgot the other thing, I'm so sorry, that I wanted to ask you was, do I have to invest in a Mac? Because I've got a bunch of PCs, I've got one with towers and towers
You do not need a Mac. The reason Macs are so popular amongst the DITs and a lot of the people in the film industry is that a lot of our deliverables are required as ProRes, and up until recently, you needed a Mac to create a true ProRes file. Adobe and a couple other programs have bought the rights to create ProRes files now. But as an independent filmmaker, that doesn't mean anything to you. It's just, ProRes is just a codec. You can work in other codecs that are native in Windows and are just as high quality as a ProRes. So Macs are not required. And I love Macs. I don't work, that's all I use, but at the same time, you don't need them.
All right. Thank you very much, Jude. I'm going to go to one of our quick questions in the chat. DPs. So either Pete or Angel, whoever wants this one, explain the tightrope you may need to walk when the director's vision exceeds the budget or crew size. How do you kind of balance that? Either one of you want it? Angel, Pete?
You want it, Pete?
Okay, I'll take it. First of all, that's a constant thing, really. I mean, I won't say every project, but most projects, I mean, it's almost a director's job to have a vision that exceeds the parameters that he's in, because he or she always wants it to be as good as it can be, right? So, but I think that's the simplest answer for that is a really clear-eyed conversation about what the alternative strategy is going to be to give them what you think the look and feel they're going for, with tools that are less than the normal ones you would use to get a grandiose look like that. So you have to have a really clear ability to know your subject matter and say, this is how I think we can do it. And it will look as good as what you're saying, but it won't be done with, you know, a Technicrane or, you know, whatever it is that you thought was required that was very expensive, that you're going to get around it. And it's just really about communication.
Good. Yep. All right, Alex, I am going to spotlight you. Go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Good morning. My name's Alex. I guess my question is kind of sort of to, I guess, focus a lot of the things that were said earlier about moving up through the ranks and a sort of a mentorship with someone in the industry. As someone who's kind of like just now entering, has gotten out of school, and between Florida and Atlanta, I've managed to work as a DP on like very small projects, mainly for festivals, obviously not getting paid. But in terms of getting your foot in the door or directly approaching someone about, for example, being a mentor, what, practically speaking, is it probably varies for a bunch of people, but in terms of is it better to move up the ranks in terms of like, you know, production assistant, camera assistant, assistant camera, DP? Is it better to have maybe like a versatile experience between a lot of the aspects of production and post, as in like being a DIT or even working in the gaffing or grip departments? And I guess what is the best advice that you may have? And I know it's probably different per person, in order to kind of get your foot in the door and begin building those relationships, or approach someone that has skin in the game about being willing to mentor you and invest in you in some ways.
Okay, thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Angel, you want this one since Peter took the last one?
Yeah. Well, I really never had the opportunity to have a mentor. I think my mentors were more gaffers and key grips that I was learning from. I never had that until I became a gaffer, no? But at one point, what happened to me, and this is my experience, you know, I decided to become a DP, you know, because my son was about to be born, and I was like, if I don't do it right now, I will never make it, you know, I will, you know. So I took that energy from there, and I said, I'm gonna be a director of photography from now on, and I'm not gonna do anything else, even though that now I'm directing and stuff like that. But I stopped learning from another gaffers, from another directors and DPs, and I started learning, making mistakes, you know. So that's also something, by yourself, hitting yourself and finding, you know. But if you're aware, that also works. Nowadays, I try to learn from experienced directors, from gaffers, from, you know, what the tricks that they can bring from another DPs. Maybe a good gaffer is working with Pete, and he learns something from him, and now I get it from him. You know, that's the way to be stealing experience, you know. And I do like that. I do have some friends that they've been mentors, and they've been able to shadow another directors and another DPs. I never had that opportunity, but I think everything is valid, though. Everything is valid. And as we were saying before, you know, with the technology, you can start experimenting before you get to set, you know. So everything is valid on my opinion.
All right, thanks for that, Alex.
Yep.
I'm going to go back to Kyle. Did you have something you want to add there?
Yeah, actually, I'd love to jump in for a second.
Sure.
For Alex. I appreciate your question, and that's awesome. You've graduated from film school and getting out there. I myself didn't go to school. I didn't have any sort of technical knowledge. I had an uncle who was in gripping for a long time, and he gave me an opportunity to meet with a production manager and start as a PA, where I eventually kind of learned different departments and what ideas to think of. Really, what I can offer you as far as someone of our generation, and that's not to put anybody down of any age, because we're all in the same set of technology together when it comes to things like Instagram and TikTok. All that stuff changes a lot faster than we can catch on to sometimes. So make your film education worth it. If you want to go into sets, understand you might start as a PA, and don't take that in any sort of wrong way. You got to cut your teeth somehow, and you might want to be in whatever department you want to be in. Camera's super popular. There's a line for that. Art in our marketplace, there's a line for that. My one buddy who's a set designer, he's like, I never thought we'd have as many people in art as they do now, but it's a very popular thing. You know, again, my advice is to find things in specializations that will give you work and will future-proof you down the line, like DITing. It's changed tremendously in 15 years. It's changing right now. But also, if you got a good group of friends who are committed to stuff, a lot of people want to talk the talk, but you have the opportunity to walk the walk. Our phones. My first business about 6 years ago, I did a little bit of drone and wedding photography with a DSLR camera and put some money into it. But I got frustrated when my partner had her iPhone, which had better graphics and all she needed was a little gimbal to make things a lot smoother than me trying to use it with a DSLR. Go out and make content for yourself. There's great resources. There's a website I think called ShareGrid or ShareTrend that has low-end cost rentals for things like Reds and Aries. If you guys can pull some funding together, get out there and make content for yourself, whether that be through social media, putting yourself out on film commissions. We have the opportunity to be creative and just go with what we see happen. But understand it's going to take time, sometimes following a path. And then some people go their own way and make their own careers in such a beautiful fashion where they can circumnavigate. You don't have to start out as a PA, but if you are not known and come on a set, that might be where you start, but you also are going to have a good old school experience about, nope, I want to be in grip now. Nope, I want to be in art. Nope, I want to do audio. Don't narrow mind yourself being like, I only want to do this. I never thought I'd be a DIT, but it's been a beautiful opportunity. The places I've gotten to go, the people I've gotten to network with. And then again, if you can, whether it's yourself or your buddies, go out and make stuff on your own. You're only going to give yourself more experience. There's a question in the chat about language, and I don't remember this book name, but Rich might know. And if not, we'll get it sent out to John to send out. But there's a book that I learned about cinematography, DPing, DIT asset. It's like the Cinematographer's Guide to Film or something like that. And Rich said, you should learn this. And I treated it like a college course. I read it several times, took notes, had a notebook. It's a little dated because it's from 2014, but it gave me a lot of overall understanding of technical stuff that I didn't have from school. Understanding what we do, what each department does, what grips do. I would recommend that. I need to get the name for it. So I appreciate that question. I think it was from Jason. But yeah, that's really what I offer for you, my friend. Just keep at it, because you never know when your time to strike the iron hot's going to be.
The book is The Filmmaker's Guide to Digital Imaging for Cinematographers by Blaine Brown. You can find it on Amazon.
Thank you.
There you go. There you go. Okay, let me just actually, Andrew, I'm gonna if you want to put your camera on, I can spotlight you, but if otherwise, just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
All right, so this is a question for Pete and Angel. So like, just say you have like you're setting up for an interview, you have the camera just straight, in front of the interviewee. You don't have the camera at an angle. Do you have any other lighting positions other than the typical 3-point lighting that you would normally use, where you have you know, your Rembrandt, your key light be Rembrandt lighting, you know, the fill, you know, be, you know, on the other side of the Rembrandt lighting, you know, at 45 degrees. And then, you know, the backlight, you know, be like, you know, a hair light or a rim light. Like, do you have any other positions that you use for 3-point, other like any 3-point lighting positions other than that setup?
Well, there's some formulas that always work to make the things look good. You know, like as you say, 3-point lighting is maybe a key light, a strong key light, or a softer fill. Highlight also works. But I think everything depends on what you're trying to create or emulate. You know, if it's an interview, you know, you may want to be able to see everything very well, and depending on the topic, you would like to make more contrast or no. If it's more drama involved, or if something more beauty, you may try to do everything a little bit more flat and make sure that you can see the eyes and they pop. You know, so I think everything, it really depends on you know, what the script says or what you're trying to achieve. I think now with nowadays, the new cinematography or the new way of telling stories, you know, and also the social media, we're used to more, I don't know if the work is organic but more natural things, you know. We're going back to that. So, you know, in that formulas, some of the elements are changing. Like, for example, backlight. You know, I don't use backlight too much anymore. I don't, you know, I try to make the things look more natural. Again, everything depends on the subject and the story that you're going for. So sometimes, you know, you don't want the light to be that perfect. Sometimes you want just to let the environment do their thing and you just enhance it a little bit. But if you are in a music video, for example, and you're doing, let's say, a hip hop music video, you may have a formula where you want more like a overhead line with, you know, stronger shadows and make the people look more aggressive, stuff like that. Or if you're doing something beauty, you can put a ring light, you know, around the lens and make sure, you know, that you can see very well. Another things that I normally use, or depends, you know, if you're portraying women or old people, or, you know, you play with how they want to be seen, you know. They want to look good or they want to look younger, you know. It's different missions. You're going to find different missions, and you have to use your tricks for that specific things, you know. Sometimes people has a lot of wrinkles here, so you want to make sure that this is in the shade, that you don't see it that much, so you bring a light a little bit higher, so, you know, the sheen blocks the neck a little bit, so it's darker and you don't see that. If you're looking for beauty, it's more about to study, you know, the person, you know, their faces, and what you really want to go for. No, I don't know if that's
Good.
yeah, that pretty much answers it. So the other question is like, when you're like lighting, like, you know, a person, you know, for that, like, you know, typical interview setup, you know, just, you know, to really keep it basic, would you use like I'm just curious if you ever done this, but would you use like, and I understand would you use like a side light as like the key maybe, and then like have like, you know, the fill be like, you know, at a 45-degree angle from them? Like, would you ever do that? Like, I'm trying to know if there's like different like ways there's like typical 3-point lighting, like ideal, like just, you know, not for anything, you know, super moody, but just, you know, for like a typical interview that's, you know, pretty neutral. It's just, you know, them explaining about something, you know, not for any towards the style. Like I get like the motivated lighting, you know, for drama, you know, you want those shadows, and like, you know, more for comedy, you want high key, but like just sort of that neutral like feeling, just is like the 3-point lighting like always ideal? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I mean, one of the 3-point lighting, or one of the setups that I like a lot is, as you say, side light 45. But I try always to get, let me see what I have here. But I try always to get some light on the second eye. I don't know if you can see now, right? You can go very, very sidey. I don't know if you can see me right now, but I try always to reach the second eye as well, right? As a storytelling. And of course, this one I'll bounce the, you know, a bounce car or something like that, just until I find the right amount of light that I want in the other side. And yeah, the backlight also looks very good all the time. Just try to, you know, especially to separate the person from the background. So you can always put a rim. And the background is another thing, you know, it's how much attention you want to put on the background. You can do a gradient, you can put a, you know, I try, one thing that I try for the background is like, I always, like, let's say if the key light is coming from this direction, from my right side, you know, I try that light the background in the same direction instead of the opposite. So it looks more natural. So if I have a key light coming from my right side, I try to bring a light from the right to hit the background. That way, everything, it looks more realistic, you know, and they're not fighting each other. That's a common and easy way to do it. And the another thing that I like to do that is very common is try to bring a bounce board. You know, you bring a bounce or a white card, not a gray one, but you bring it and you put it right under the frame. That way you got something, you know, bouncing into it, and it brings some shine on the eyes. That's also a very common thing that you can find. But I think the key on that is the diffusion. You know, I like to put a lot of diffusion so that things look more natural. If you go with a light that is maybe too strong, first, maybe the person won't be able to look at the camera really well, you know, because their eyes are going to be affected by the amount of light, and also because it's a more pleasant look in their faces, and if they have wrinkles or something like that, no? I don't know if that's...
All right, thank you very much, Angel. I'm going to do one more question from the chat. We got one more question from our guest, from our audience, and then we'll get rolling. Pete, quick question to you. How much do you find directors using storyboards compared to shot lists these days?
On motion picture now, the most common thing that I see is a previs. So it's going to be created by the art / visual effects end of the movie, and especially because there's so much integration of visual effects in most motion pictures, even ones that aren't heavily affected movies. So I find a previs to be the most common thing that I'm dealing with these days.
Perfect. And then Jason, I don't know if am I pronouncing your name right? Go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, you did a great job on that one. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so for everybody, what do you guys see the state of Florida, like film in Florida, over the next year or 2 or 3 years? Like, do you think it's going to grow? Do you think it's going to kind of stagnate a little bit? Is it in decline? Like, what is everybody's opinion of what's going on?
I'll speak to my opinion on that. I feel like there's a lot of pressure on the industry to want to shoot in Florida. I have several projects on the horizon that have picked stories that were set in Florida, and there's just sort of fighting for a way to do it economically. I know that Broward County, for example, was trying to do their own small incentive program, and I know way back when I worked on Dolphin Tale, too, they had created a little local incentive to help integrate. So I think that hopefully that could be something we could see in the future, is that certain areas, maybe even counties or cities, see the value of getting all the ancillary benefits of people coming and using restaurants and hotels, and you know, obviously we're all talking here, we know there's a pretty good base of local crew that are based here. So I mean, I'd like to be optimistic about it, because I feel like there's pressure to be here, and that's just a question of whether the economics line up.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that real quick, Miami-Dade County, Broward County, Hillsborough County, all have specific incentive programs. The one in Pinellas County is a little bit in flux right now, but hopefully they get that figured out. Palm Beach County also has something. It's more geared towards tourism television, tourism-based television, but there is something to help content producers there. Jacksonville has one. And then there's discussions around the state, with the local. So there are definitely local film incentives, and those areas absolutely see an uptick in business. There's no doubt about it. So just wanted to speak to that. Anybody else want to touch on kind of the next year or two? Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah,
And then
so
Rich.
I've not been super in the loop with stuff, but as far as the couple years I've been living in the St. Petersburg area, we definitely seem to have a back and forth about our tax incentive, which from other emails I'm getting through the Film Florida commissions is right now we're in danger of losing that again with, I guess, the HB5 proposition. So I'm part of a email thread about, hey, let's write our personal stories to the governors in Tallahassee and making sure they understand this is important. This is someone's livelihood. Obviously, John, your organization, people like yourself are super integral in keep helping us all stay employed and be good. Atlanta's the big market next to Los Angeles, but me and Rich live in the Tampa St. Pete area. It might be small, but we got a hardworking crew. You got people in Miami doing great things, Orlando, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, all that kind of stuff. I know right now in the next year or two, we could have issues because, again, the legislators don't understand the value of what we do. The beaches speak for itself. Florida's a beautiful area, but we provide a certain service of advertisement that I've been to all sorts of small local gems like Tarpon Springs, the Sponge Docks, Whimsyland, and Dunedin. I've gotten to go, up to the Panhandle. I've gotten to go down to Miami and South Beach. I've gotten to go down to the Keys. You don't always get that, even if you're living here. You don't think to go past a couple streets where you're living because the coffee shop you're next to is so convenient. We provide a service that not only is obvious for the macro senses of the beaches in Disney World and all that kind of stuff, but then there's everything that builds local small communities that we get to showcase when it comes to these little hole in the wall locations. So again, I appreciate Film Florida and this opportunity, but we all got to fight together and be a community. We got to stand for each other, and we got to stand for rates. We got to stand for protecting our tax incentives. That way we don't lose it to Georgia, even though they have a beautiful thing, but we got to fight for ourselves and show this is what's going, especially everyone is still moving around the country since COVID. They want to come to places that are a little bit easier to deal with. That's why we had such an influx of California and New York clients during times where they couldn't work. We were there to supply them and provide the backbone and showcase really what we had to offer as a good professional market.
Good. Kyle, go ahead, Rich.
I'm gonna take a little bit of a different angle. At least here in Central Florida. Yeah, I agree. The working with feature films and things like that, the incentives are not there, but we do a lot of commercial work here in the Central Florida area. I always say Tampa and Orlando are just one big city because we're usually shooting one day and shooting the next the other day. And the commercials don't work off of the incentives. They never put in for the incentives and get that. So there are large companies or from around the country, Fortune 500 companies that come here to shoot their commercials, and they'll learn that we have the facilities and the crew and the talent here to be able to do work that's just as good as New York or LA, usually at better rates, and give them high quality products. That they can take back to do their post work and wherever they do for their final stuff. So I don't see that really changing over the next 2 years, because even though, regardless of what happens with the economy in general, that commercials need to be made because people need to buy products. Companies need to sell products, and they do that by shooting commercials. And I see that is going to continue regardless of what happens up in Tallahassee, regardless of how things go in general. People are going to come here to work, and I think living here and having contacts here gives us a good advantage for that to be a part of that.
Yeah, Rich, that's a great point. I mean, when people ask me the question of like kind of what's the state of the industry, it's a mixed bag. Commercials, music videos, corporate communications, convention videos, independent films have always been very strong here in Florida, will continue to be very strong. That made for TV movie, we're seeing a lot more of those. Hopefully those budgets continue to inch up a little bit more. The local incentives do help a lot with those type of projects, as well as the bits and pieces of feature films and television series. there's no arguing that we struggle to attract full feature films and full television series. We've gotten a couple here and there. There's, and those have been great. But we are going to struggle to attract those on an ongoing basis. It's important to know who your audience is. We know what our audience is. Like Rich said, that's kind of our audience right now. And so I think everybody needs to be realistic and focus on those type of projects, and provide great service. Because in the end, if we provide great service, you might get another project or two down the line, even if it doesn't make sense for them financially because they've had a good experience. And so, our organization is going to continue to fight in Tallahassee. There's no coincidence that all of the local incentives that are around the state are members of Film Florida, because those local film commissions are all working closely together to try and get all that information and get those local incentives. So it is a mixed bag, and I think it will continue to be so. So we are running really short on time. Richard, if you want to type your question in the chat box, I'll try and get it real quick. But I want to give the panelists an opportunity just to go around real fast and plug. You got a website, you got social media, email addresses, phone numbers, whatever you want to get out there so everybody can contact you if needed or learn more about you. Go ahead. Angel, you start.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm very happy to share with you guys here today and see some familiar faces. Thank you very much. I mean, I'm gonna put my information on the chat so everybody can have it. And no, as you say, I mean, we all have to be together and try to, give the best experience to all these projects that are coming to town, because we want them to keep on coming, right? And we decided to live here for a reason that's important. So it's very sad that we all have to go somewhere else looking for jobs and for work. All right. Thank you very much.
Rich, go ahead and plug away.
Yeah, like I said, if you're interested, I'll put my info in the chat now as well. If you're interested in reaching out to me, it's rich@silverboxstudios.com, and I'll put my cell number there as well. And like I said, if I have any questions or anything I can help you out with, please let me know. I'll be happy to help.
Thank you, Rich. Peter?
Thanks a lot for inviting me into the Zoom, John, and it was really great to meet the rest of the panelists, Angel and Rich and Kyle. It was really nice to get to meet you guys on here, and thanks a lot for all the questions. Yeah, I'll put an email up on the post if anybody wants to circle back with any questions.
Okay, and Kyle?
Yeah, I'll do the same, put the info out. A lot of the stuff you guys can find me working on is through a company called the Miles Partnership. It gets premiered on YouTube and Amazon Prime. We got shows known as Amplify coming out. We have Venturing Out. We got a couple other things down the pipeline I probably can't talk about right now, but that's a lot of what's in my vein. And sometimes just posting stories on Instagram, Kyle S. Fenclau, which I'll write in there. So again, thanks for everybody, and I hope it helped all our participants, and great to meet everybody on the panel. Thank you so much.
Excellent. And go ahead, guys, and put that stuff in the chat box. Those of you that are going to watch this on recording obviously don't have the chat box, but we will put that information in the YouTube and the Facebook information section, so anybody watching after the fact will get that. But that is going to wrap up another edition of Film Florida Friday. Thanks to Angel, Pete, Kyle, and Rich for being with us, and thank you to everybody that was with us today. We'll be back next month with another edition of Film Florida Friday. The registration link is in the chat box. We're going to do email blasts. It's going to be about virtual production, which is obviously a big hot topic these days. I want to thank all of our Film Florida members for their continued support. I mention this every month. It continues to be important. If you're not a member of Film Florida, we hope you will consider joining at filmflorida.org. If you enjoy the Film Florida Fridays, please consider donating $20.23 for our 2023 fundraising campaign. You can find that link in the chat box as well as on our website. Keep up with everything we're doing on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Make sure you check out the Film Florida podcast on Apple, Google, Stitcher, and Spotify, Podbean. Thanks again for being here, everybody, and have a great day.
Goodbye now.
Bye-bye.